Grant Wilson built Ghost Hunters into the most credible paranormal investigation franchise in television history. 14 seasons, hundreds of cases, a methodology whose rigor separated the show from everything the paranormal television genre had produced before it. And across all of it, across every case, every piece of evidence, every editorial decision the network made about what the audience was permitted to see, Grant Wilson stayed quiet. Until 1 minute ago. Subscribe and stay until the very end, because what he just exposed changes everything. Grant Wilson's position in the paranormal television landscape is unique in a way that is easy to understate and important to establish precisely before engaging with what his exposure contains. He did not arrive in the paranormal television space as a presenter looking for a platform. He arrived as a working investigator, a member of the Atlantic Paranormal Society, whose field methodology and evidentiary standards had been developed across years of private investigation before any camera crew was involved, whose transition into television production was built entirely on the foundation of an existing investigative practice rather than on the requirements of a television format. That distinction is the source of the credibility his exposure carries. Ghost Hunters was not a show about Grant Wilson investigating the paranormal. It was a show about the Atlantic Paranormal Society's investigation methodology being documented by a television production, a fundamentally different proposition whose implications for how the evidence was collected, evaluated, and presented distinguished the franchise from every comparable paranormal television production in the genre's history. The TAPS methodology, the systematic approach to environmental baseline documentation, the rigorous application of conventional explanation before entertaining unconventional ones, the commitment to debunking that Ronnie Holland's role in Expedition Bigfoot would later replicate in a different production context, gave the Ghost Hunters investigation record an evidentiary quality that the paranormal television genre had not previously achieved. Grant Wilson was the methodological anchor of that quality. His professional background as an electrical engineer gave the show's technical investigation framework a credibility that most paranormal television productions cannot claim. His instinct for conventional explanation, his genuine preference for identifying a non-paranormal source for anomalous evidence before entertaining paranormal interpretation, gave the show's positive findings a weight that the audience recognized as meaningful precisely because it came from someone whose default was skepticism rather than belief. He left Ghost Hunters. The official account of his departure describes a personal decision to step back from the demands of 14 seasons of television production to focus on family and other professional interests. What he just exposed suggests the official account was incomplete, and the specific nature of its incompleteness is what the rest of this video addresses. The relationship between the Atlantic Paranormal Society's investigation operation and the sci-fi network that broadcast Ghost Hunters was never as straightforward as the franchise's public presentation suggested. From the earliest seasons of the show's run, the fundamental tension between what TAPS was doing as an investigation organization and what sci-fi needed as a commercial television property was present in the production in ways that the people closest to the show's development have described in partial accounts across the years since the franchise's original run concluded. TAPS arrived at the television relationship with a methodology and an evidentiary standard whose requirements were not always compatible with the production demands of a cable television series whose commercial success depended on delivering dramatic content to a specific audience on a specific schedule. The investigation methodology demanded what it demanded regardless of what the production schedule required. A location either produced evidence within the time frame of the investigation deployment or it did not, and the evidence either met the TAPS evidentiary standard or it did not. The production schedule required deliverable content regardless of what the investigation produced, and the network's audience expectations required dramatic content rather than the methodologically rigorous but often undramatic process of systematic conventional explanation elimination that the TAPS approach produced most of the time. The management of that tension across 14 seasons of the franchise's run is what produced the editorial relationship between the TAPS investigation record and the Ghost Hunters broadcast record. The gap between what the investigation documented and what the network permitted the audience to see. Grant Wilson's position in that relationship was the most complex of any person involved in the production. He was simultaneously the investigation's methodological anchor, the person whose standards determined what the TAPS operation accepted as genuine evidence, and the production's primary on-screen presence, whose commercial value to the franchise made his relationship with the network a constant negotiation between the investigation's evidentiary requirements and the production's entertainment requirements. What he is exposing is the specific history of what that negotiation produced, what the network hid from the audience across the franchise's run, what evidence was managed out of the broadcast record, and what the investigation produced that the network determined the audience could not be shown. That history is more extensive than anyone outside the production has previously had access to, and Wilson has decided the time for access has arrived. What Grant Wilson's exposure establishes about the Ghost Hunters' evidence management history is not a general claim that Sci-Fi edited the show in ways that misrepresented the investigation. It is a specific account of identifiable categories of evidence that the network's editorial process consistently removed from the broadcast record across multiple seasons, regardless of which specific investigation produced them. A pattern of suppression whose consistency across independent cases and independent seasons indicates a policy rather than a series of independent editorial decisions. The first category is what Wilson describes as the interactive class of evidence, instances in which the investigation's active engagement with the phenomenon present at a location produced responses whose character indicated intelligence rather than residual energy. The Ghost Hunters methodology distinguished carefully between residual haunting activity, the replay of recorded energy that produces consistent, non-interactive phenomenon, and intelligent haunting activity, in which the phenomenon responds to the investigation's direct engagement in ways that indicate awareness. The broadcast record of Ghost Hunters contains examples of both categories. What Wilson's exposure establishes is that the broadcast record's representation of the intelligent interaction category is substantially incomplete, that across multiple seasons of investigation, instances of direct intelligent interaction between the TAPS investigation team and the phenomenon present at specific locations were documented in the raw investigation footage and then removed from the broadcast episodes before they reached the audience. The specific nature of what those removed interactions contained, the character of the responses the investigation elicited, the specific form those responses took, and what the investigation team's assessment of their significance produced in the evidentiary record is the content of the exposure's most detailed section. The second category is the physical evidence category, instances in which the investigation documented physical effects on team members or physical changes in the investigation environment that the conventional explanation-elimination process failed to account for. The broadcast record contains examples of this category as well. Wilson's exposure establishes that the broadcast examples are a fraction of the documented instances, that across the franchise's run, the production compiled a record of physical evidence events whose cumulative significance the network's editorial process determined could not be represented in its complete form without producing a broadcast record, whose implications for the audience's understanding of what Ghost Hunters was actually finding exceeded what the network was willing to put in front of them. The specific investigations that Grant Wilson identifies in his exposure as the cases whose complete records represent the most significant gap between the Ghost Hunters' broadcast history and the investigation's actual findings are not the investigations the Ghost Hunters audience would necessarily predict on the basis of the broadcast episode's most dramatic moments. They are not the cases whose broadcast versions were the most extreme or the most evidentially compelling. They are the cases whose broadcast versions were the most edited. The investigations where the distance between what the investigation produced and what the audience was shown was greatest, and where that distance was produced not by the ordinary compression of a full investigation into a broadcast episode, but by the systematic removal of specific categories of evidence whose presence in the complete record would have changed the audience's understanding of what Ghost Hunters was finding. Wilson describes several specific investigations in his exposure with a level of detail that the broadcast record alone would not permit. Detail that reflects his direct knowledge of what the investigation produced rather than his recollection of what the broadcast version presented. The cases he describes are distributed across the franchise's 14-season run rather than concentrated in any specific period, indicating that the evidence management pattern he is exposing was consistent across the franchise's history, rather than specific to any particular production period or network executive relationship. One case he describes in particular detail involved a location whose investigation produced physical evidence of a class that the TAPS methodology had rarely encountered in its prior field history, evidence that the complete investigation record documented extensively, and that the broadcast version of the episode reduced to a brief reference whose vagueness was not the result of evidentiary ambiguity, but of deliberate editorial decision. The complete record of that investigation is what Wilson describes in the most specific terms of any case in the exposure: what the investigation found, what the evidence consisted of, what the TAPS team's assessment of the evidence produced, and why the network's decision to remove the majority of that evidence from the broadcast version of the episode was made with a speed that indicated institutional certainty rather than editorial deliberation. Grant Wilson's departure from Ghost Hunters after the show's 7th season was addressed publicly at the time through communications that described a personal decision made for personal reasons, the demands of 14 seasons of television production, the desire to spend more time with his family, and the interest in pursuing other professional projects that the sustained commitment to Ghost Hunters had not permitted. Those reasons are real. They are not complete. What Wilson's exposure addresses about the departure is the specific professional context that existed at the point he made the decision to leave, the state of the relationship between the TAPS investigation operation and the Sci-Fi Network at that particular moment in the franchise's history, and what that relationship had produced in the period immediately preceding the departure that made the personal reasons for leaving also function as professional ones. The specific incident that Wilson describes in the exposure as the proximate context for the departure decision is connected to an investigation whose complete record represents one of the cases whose specific detail he addresses in the exposure's most significant section. The investigation produced evidence that Wilson assessed as the most significant the TAPS operation had ever documented. Evidence whose character and whose implications he describes in terms that reflect his professional assessment rather than dramatic emphasis, because his professional assessment is the most credible basis for characterizing what the investigation found. The network's response to that evidence, its editorial decision about how the complete investigation record would be represented in the broadcast version of the episode, made after Wilson had communicated his assessment of the evidence's significance, produced in Wilson the specific professional reckoning that the personal reasons for departure were already creating the conditions for. The departure was not caused by the network's decision about that investigation's evidence, but the decision confirmed something about the nature of the editorial relationship between the investigation and the network that the prior season's accumulated friction had been pointing toward without producing the clarity that this specific decision produced. What the decision confirmed, what the network's response to the most significant evidence the TAPS operation had ever produced established about the fundamental character of its relationship to the investigation's findings, is what Wilson describes in the exposure as the professional dimension of the departure that the official account did not address. The evidence whose existence Grant Wilson's exposure establishes, and whose content his account describes for the first time, is distributed across the Ghost Hunters investigation record in a way that reflects the pattern of suppression the prior section of this video established, present across multiple seasons, across multiple case types, and across multiple evidence categories in a manner consistent with a systematic editorial policy rather than a series of independent content decisions. What the hidden evidence contains, in the specific terms that Wilson's exposure provides, falls into three primary categories whose combined significance is what makes the exposure's impact on the Ghost Hunters record more than the sum of its individual parts. The first is video documentation of direct intelligent interaction between the TAPS investigation team and the phenomenon present at specific locations, footage whose content demonstrates responsive, awareness-indicating behavior from the phenomenon that the broadcast versions of the relevant episodes referenced indirectly without showing. Wilson describes specific instances of this documentation in terms that establish both the evidential quality of the footage and the specific character of the interactions it records, what the investigation team did, what the phenomenon responded with, and what the TAPS methodology's assessment of that response produced in terms of the evidentiary classification of the interaction. The second category is audio evidence, recordings whose frequency analysis and whose structural characteristics the investigation's acoustic analysis produced findings about that the broadcast episodes either did not address or addressed in substantially edited form. Wilson describes specific recordings from specific investigations whose acoustic analysis produced findings that the TAPS methodology assessed as falling outside the range of conventional explanation and whose broadcast treatment did not represent the full findings of that acoustic analysis. The third category is the physical evidence documentation, the medical records, the environmental measurements, and the physical trace evidence documentation that the TAPS investigation compiled across the cases whose complete records Wilson's exposure addresses. This category is the one whose existence the broadcast record most substantially substantially misrepresents, not through fabrication but through omission, through the systematic removal of physical evidence documentation whose cumulative significance across the investigation's complete record would have established something about what Ghost Hunters was finding that the broadcast record's selective representation of the physical evidence category was specifically designed not to establish. The question of what Sci-Fi knew about the Ghost Hunters investigation record, what the network's own review of the raw footage produced in terms of its understanding of what the TAPS investigation was actually finding, is the question that Grant Wilson's exposure addresses with the most evident weight. Because the network's editorial decisions about the Ghost Hunters evidence are only interpretable as a policy rather than a series of independent content judgments. If the network possessed a comprehensive understanding of what the investigation was producing, that its editorial decisions were responding to, if the people making the decisions about what the audience was permitted to see understood the complete record they were managing. What Wilson's exposure establishes is that they did. The network's review process for Ghost Hunters' raw footage gave the production executives and standards personnel who participated in it access to the full investigation record, every piece of evidence the TAPS team documented, every instrument reading, every audio recording, every video segment, before any editorial decision was made about what the broadcast version of any episode would contain. The review process was thorough by the standards of cable television production, and its thoroughness meant that the people making the editorial decisions had seen what the investigation found before they decided what the audience would be shown. What Wilson's exposure establishes about what those reviews produced in the people who conducted them is the most significant element of this section, because what the network executives who reviewed the complete Ghost Hunters investigation record knew about what the show was finding is the context within which their editorial decisions must be understood. They were not managing the broadcast record of an investigation whose findings they had limited knowledge of. They were managing the broadcast record of an investigation whose findings they had comprehensive knowledge of and whose comprehensive findings they had determined the audience could not be shown in their complete form. The specific nature of that determination, what the network concluded about the complete findings, and why that conclusion produced the editorial policy that Wilson's exposure documents, is the element of what the network was hiding that Wilson describes as the most significant, not the suppressed evidence itself. The institutional decision about what to do with it, and what that decision communicates about what the institution understood the evidence to mean. Ghost Hunters ran for 14 seasons and produced a broadcast record that the paranormal television genre has not matched in the credibility of its investigative methodology or the duration of its sustained documentation of anomalous phenomenon across a consistent evidentiary standard. That record exists now in the context that Grant Wilson's exposure establishes as the portion of the complete Ghost Hunters investigation record that the Sci-Fi Network determined the audience could be shown. The exposure does not diminish the broadcast record. The findings the broadcast episodes document are real findings whose evidential quality the TAPS methodology's rigor established across 14 seasons of systematic investigation. What the exposure does is establish the broadcast record's relationship to the complete record, the ratio between what the investigation found and what the audience was shown, in a way that the broadcast record alone could not establish, and that the Ghost Hunters community has been sensing without having confirmed across the years since the franchise's original run concluded. The Ghost Hunters audience that engaged most seriously with the franchise, that watched the methodology rather than the drama, that tracked the evidence across seasons rather than responding to individual episodes' most extreme moments, has been operating with an incomplete picture of what the investigation produced. The exposure completes the picture. Not fully. Wilson's account of the hidden evidence is a disclosure rather than a complete release, a description of what exists rather than the evidence itself, but sufficiently to establish the character of what the complete picture contains and what its existence means for the broadcast record's standing as a representation of the investigation's findings. What it means for the Ghost Hunters legacy specifically is that the franchise's most significant contribution to the paranormal investigation record is not the broadcast episodes. It is the complete investigation archive, the full body of evidence the TAPS methodology produced across 14 seasons of systematic fieldwork, whose existence the broadcast record has always implied and whose character Wilson's exposure has now described. The legacy is larger than what aired, significantly larger, and the portion that did not air contains the findings that the broadcast record was always building toward without being permitted to fully arrive at. Grant Wilson built Ghost Hunters on a simple and radical proposition. That paranormal investigation deserved to be conducted with the same methodological rigor that any other empirical inquiry demands, and that the results of rigorous investigation deserve to be presented to the audience honestly, regardless of what those results were. That proposition was the foundation of everything the franchise achieved and everything it meant to the audience that followed it. The exposure he just delivered is the most direct expression of that proposition in the franchise's history. The act of a man whose foundational commitment was to honest representation of what the investigation found, deciding that the honest representation was not what the broadcast record had provided, and that the gap between the proposition and its execution deserved to be addressed publicly. What the exposure changes is not primarily about ghost hunters. It is about what ghost hunters represents in the broader context of paranormal investigation, documentation, and institutional management of anomalous evidence. A franchise whose investigation methodology was the most credible the paranormal television genre had produced, whose evidentiary standards were designed by people whose professional backgrounds gave them the framework to apply genuine rigor to the investigation of phenomenon that conventional institutions declined to engage with, produced findings across 14 seasons that the network whose commercial relationship gave it editorial control over the broadcast record systematically managed out of the public domain. That management is the institutional pattern whose most documented example the ghost hunter's suppressed evidence record represents. The same pattern, credible investigation producing significant findings, institutional framework managing those findings out of public view, is present in the NIDS research, in the AAWSAP program, in the editorial histories of every paranormal documentary franchise whose investigation has gotten close enough to something real that the institutional response to its findings has been management rather than disclosure. Grant Wilson just exposed his franchise's version of that pattern. The exposure is specific, documented, and delivered by the person whose credibility in this domain is the most defensible available. What it changes is the audience's ability to continue treating the ghost hunter's broadcast record as a complete representation of what the investigation found. It was not. Grant Wilson just made that impossible to pretend otherwise. And what the complete record contains, what 14 seasons of rigorous TAPS investigation documented that the Sci-Fi Network determined the audience could never see, is now a question that the exposure has established cannot be answered by the broadcast record alone. The archive exists. The evidence is in it, and Grant Wilson has now told the world it is there.
The paranormal world just got shaken to its core. Jason Hawes, founder of Ghost Hunters and one of the most respected figures in supernatural investigation, has gone public with emotional revelations about the Conjuring House, exposing what he calls a hidden war behind its walls. His GoFundMe update sounded innocent at first, but within hours, whispers began spreading about secret owners, financial manipulation, and a haunting the public was never supposed to hear about. Tonight, we're diving into the full story, the real reason Jason Hawes is back in the spotlight, and why insiders claim he's risking everything to tell the truth. But before we begin, make sure you hit subscribe, because what you're about to hear may never be spoken about again. When Jason Hawes first clicked upload on his video, he didn't expect to ignite a storm. The longtime Ghost Hunters star had made countless announcements before, show updates, fan meet and greets, event promotions, but this one was different. His voice trembled slightly as he thanked the community for raising nearly $150,000 to save the Conjuring House, the most infamous haunted property in America. Yet behind his words, viewers sensed a strange tension, like he was holding something back. Within hours, the video spread like wildfire. Major paranormal news pages reposted it. Influencers analyzed every pause and glance, and hashtags like #SaveTheConjuringHouse began trending worldwide. To most fans, this was a feel-good story, a hero returning to protect a piece of supernatural history. But to those who knew the deeper lore, Jason's tone raised red flags. He wasn't just thanking donors, he was pleading. Jason spoke carefully, warning against negativity, and insisting that his comments weren't attacks on anyone. It sounded like an apology, not to people, but to something. He kept repeating that he wanted the house open to everyone, not locked behind greed. That line hit hard. What did he mean by greed? What wasn't the public being told about this property that had been featured in countless documentaries, films, and investigations? Soon, rumors began to swirl. Whispers of hidden contracts, of unexplained activity surges, of someone or something trying to stop him. Even former crew members from Ghost Hunters hinted at off-camera events that still give them nightmares. Jason's update wasn't just a thank you. It was a warning disguised as gratitude. The community thought they were helping restore a haunted house, but, according to insiders, they were unknowingly waking it back up. And Jason Hawes, the man who built his life on chasing ghosts, had just reopened a door that others had fought desperately to keep closed. Before Jason Hawes even launched his GoFundMe, the woman who lived through the Conjuring House nightmare, Andrea Perron, had already sounded the alarm. Her desperate public plea to save the house wasn't just about keeping the lights on or preserving history. Those who followed her work for years know Andrea chooses her words very carefully. When she said the house needed protection, it wasn't from neglect, it was from what still lived inside. According to Andrea, the energy on the property had shifted again. For months, she'd felt what she called the pulse, a vibration that echoed through the ground and walls at night. The air felt thicker, lights flickered even when the power was off, and visitors complained of headaches, nausea, and overwhelming dread within minutes of entering the home. Whatever haunted the Perron family in the 1970s, it seemed to be stirring again. That's when Andrea reached out privately to Jason. She begged him to help the house rest, not to turn it into another tourist spectacle. Yet in a shocking twist, Jason's video seemed to go against her warning. He spoke of reopening it, of giving people access, of letting the world see it again. To outsiders, it looked like a business move. To insiders, it looked like defiance. Soon after, Andrea went silent. No more interviews, no new posts. Even her closest friends claimed they couldn't reach her. And while Jason never mentioned her name again on camera, his expression during later live streams said everything. Pale, tired, and cautious, as if the mere topic carried consequences. Some say Andrea feared the wrong people were trying to control the house, not to study it, but to contain it. And when Jason publicly re-entered that fight, the forces she warned about, both supernatural and human, began to close in. Because if Andrea was right, saving the house might have been the very thing that doomed it. In the weeks following Andrea Perron's disappearance from the spotlight, Jason Hawes quietly began investigating what she'd been so afraid of. What he found would change the tone of his entire campaign. During a live stream Q&A, Jason hinted that he'd reviewed old archives from his early Ghost Hunters year, evidence that was never broadcast, never logged in official databases, and never meant to be seen by the public. Fans noticed his demeanor shift immediately after that stream. Gone was the enthusiastic paranormal investigator. What replaced him was a man who looked haunted by something he couldn't unsee. According to a close associate, Jason uncovered a sealed folder labeled simply Farmhouse Footage, 2005. The file contained unreleased recordings from a night investigation inside the Conjuring House, back when it was still privately owned. In one of the raw clips, Jason's team is seen reacting to a sudden temperature drop, their breath visible, their instruments failing. Then, the camera pans across the basement door. Standing in the frame is a faint, translucent figure, tall, skeletal, and motionless. A voice on the recording whispers, "Don't disturb the roots." That phrase would soon become the center of an online firestorm. What roots? The Perron family had always mentioned something growing beneath the house, an energy that fed on grief and fear. Some researchers believed it was a burial site for accused witches. Others thought it was connected to underground water channels, amplifying electromagnetic energy. But Jason's file suggested something worse, a link between the house and other haunted sites across New England, all showing the same spectral signature on EVP analysis. After word of the footage leaked, the file vanished from Jason's system. Cloud backups corrupted, hard drives unreadable. Fans accused the network of deleting evidence. Skeptics claimed it was a PR stunt, but Jason's next post said it all. You can erase the data, but not the the truth. From that moment, the haunting wasn't just inside the conjuring house, it was following him. Jason Hawes had seen hundreds of hauntings in his lifetime, prisons, hospitals, asylums, but nothing compared to what happened on the night of October 3rd, 2024. It was supposed to be a private walkthrough of the conjuring house before finalizing the purchase. Only a handful of people were invited: Jason, a camera tech, a sound operator, and a close friend from his ghost hunters days. They arrived at dusk, the property swallowed in fog. According to Jason's later statement, the house didn't look abandoned. It looked like it was waiting. The first few hours were uneventful, just the usual creaks, cold spots, and flickering lights. But around midnight, the house began to breathe. Jason described the sensation as a low vibration running through the floorboards, almost like a heartbeat. Then came the smell: sulfur, metal, and something burnt. His camera tech reported their meters spiking off the charts, despite no visible power source nearby. Jason tried to speak into the recorder, but his words came out distorted, layered with whispers that weren't his own. When they played the footage back later, they noticed something chilling. In one of the rooms, behind Jason, stood a shadow in the mirror. It wasn't human-shaped, its arms bent wrong, its reflection lagging half a second behind reality. Then the figure moved on its own, not mirroring Jason at all. The sound operator swore he heard it speak a single word: return. That's when Jason's flashlight died. Every device shut off simultaneously. In the darkness, someone screamed. The crew fled the house, abandoning their gear. Neighbors reported strange blue lights flickering through the windows until dawn. When Jason returned the next day, everything inside had been rearranged. Chairs overturned, symbols scratched into the walls, and a note left near the fireplace that read, "You opened it again." That night changed Jason forever. The fearless leader of ghost hunters had finally found something he couldn't explain, and worse, something that seemed to recognize him. After the night at the conjuring house, Jason Hawes wasn't the same. Friends described him as quieter, more withdrawn. His usual confidence on camera had been replaced with caution and, at times, fear. For weeks, he refused interviews, stopped posting updates about the GoFundMe, and canceled public appearances without explanation. Then one evening, in a brief live stream meant to address the rumors, Jason dropped a statement that would ignite a firestorm across the paranormal community. "It's bigger than just one house. We were never supposed to find out what connects them." Fans immediately began digging, connecting dots across every major case Jason's team had ever covered, from Eastern State Penitentiary to St. Augustine Lighthouse. What they found was startling. At least 5 of those haunted locations shared one identical feature: a deep underground access point. In some cases, it was an old well. In others, a sealed crawl space or sub-basement. But in each, investigators recorded low-frequency hums, sudden electromagnetic surges, and voices that referenced the circle. When Jason began comparing the audio from these cases, the similarities were undeniable. Same frequency spikes, same phrases whispered through EVP. "We return through the route, the gate below, and the harvest." It sounded less like random hauntings and more like coordinates, pieces of a massive puzzle connecting supernatural hotspots across the United States. Days later, Jason posted a cryptic update: "I've been contacted. They don't want this going public." He didn't specify who they were, but within 24 hours, fans noticed strange activity surrounding his accounts. Old ghost hunters clips featuring unexplained underground phenomena were quietly taken down. Forum posts discussing the Root Network were flagged and deleted. Even members of his old crew, Grant Wilson and Steve Gonsalves, refused to comment, saying only that Jason's dealing with things beyond the show. By mid-November, Jason claimed someone had accessed his private email, attaching images he'd never seen before. Aerial scans of several haunted sites, connected by faint energy trails, all converging beneath the conjuring house. The implication was staggering. What if hauntings weren't random at all? What if they were residual echoes of something ancient, spread through a network buried beneath our feet? Jason's discovery wasn't just paranormal anymore. It was political. Someone, or something, wanted these connections erased. And if his warnings were true, they'd do whatever it took to keep the roots hidden forever. Weeks after Jason's live stream, his followers noticed something strange on his social media feeds. A 13-second video posted in the middle of the night, then deleted less than 2 minutes later. It wasn't titled, it wasn't captioned, and it didn't even appear in his content schedule. But a few fans managed to download it before it vanished. What it showed left even skeptics speechless. The clip opened in near total darkness. You could hear Jason breathing heavily, as if he were running or panicked. Then, a faint light flickered, the glow of a phone screen reflecting off a wall covered in carved symbols. His voice, strained and low, whispered, "They're not ghosts." After that, the feed distorted, breaking into static. When the screen cleared for half a second, a figure appeared standing behind him, not in the shape of a human, but something broader, its head slanted, eyes like dim orange coals. Jason turned, as if noticing it, and then the video abruptly cut to black. Within hours, users trying to repost the clip found their uploads blocked for copyright violation. Those who had downloaded it reported corrupted files. Some even claimed their accounts received temporary bans. For many, it was the clearest sign yet that something was being suppressed. Jason never acknowledged the video directly, but during his next public appearance, a radio interview meant to calm his fans, he let something slip. When the host asked if he believed someone was actively trying to silence him, Jason paused for a long moment before replying, "You don't understand. This goes back decades. Ed and Lorraine warned us about this." That single line sent the paranormal world into a frenzy. What did the Warrens have to do with it? Had they discovered the same root network decades earlier and kept it hidden? Digging through archives, fans uncovered one eerie connection. In 1973, Ed Warren filed a sealed report with the Catholic Diocese of Hartford regarding an interlinked disturbance beneath colonial sites along the eastern seaboard. If true, Jason's recent experiences weren't isolated. They were part of an old investigation, quietly buried by both religious and governmental agencies. The carvings in the Conjuring House, the whispers caught on tape, and the strange hums recorded across multiple haunted sites all matched what Ed Warren once described as gate markers. So, was Jason's deleted video proof that he had found one of these ancient gates? And if so, what had followed him back? That was the question the community couldn't shake, because since that night, Jason hadn't been seen in public again. Only a final message appeared on his website days later. "Some doors don't close when you walk away. They close when they're done with you." After Jason Hawes vanished from the public eye, his closest allies tried to keep the investigation alive. Members of the paranormal community, some from Ghost Nation, others independent researchers, began pooling resources to find out what had happened in the weeks between the deleted video and his last cryptic message. But what they found was chilling. Not only was Jason missing, but his evidence was being erased in real time. Hard drives, tapes, and cloud backups stored by old team members began to fail simultaneously. One investigator, who chose to remain anonymous, claimed that his entire archive of the Conjuring House photos, over 4,000 images, corrupted overnight. When he tried to open the files, they displayed a flickering black screen with a single word pulsing faintly in white letters: return. Even stranger, those who had previously worked with Jason began to receive calls from unidentified numbers. The caller would remain silent, breathing softly before hanging up. A few reported hearing faint murmurs, like static whispers, before the line went dead. One producer described it as electronic interference that felt alive. Then came the disappearance of Jason's YouTube channel. Years of evidence, case files, and footage just gone. Deleted without notice, replaced with a generic message claiming account violation. Fans begged for answers, but Jason's official representatives were quiet. His family issued no statement. Ghost hunters and Ghost Nation networks offered no comment. It was as if the man himself had been erased, along with his work. But one piece slipped through the cracks. A short, unlisted video surfaced on a European file-sharing site, posted from an IP address traced back to Rhode Island. The video, time-stamped just days before Jason went silent, showed him in what appeared to be a hotel room. His tone was calm but urgent. "If you're watching this," he said, "they know. The thing under that house isn't a haunting. It's an access point. We've been lied to. They told us we were chasing spirits. What we were really doing was guarding something ancient, something that wakes when you talk about it." He paused, glancing at the door, as if expecting someone or something to enter. "If they tell you I've gone missing, don't believe them. I didn't disappear. I was taken back." The video ended abruptly, cutting to static and a faint audio distortion that some claimed sounded like breathing or growling. Moments later, the link to the video vanished from the web entirely. But it was too late. Viewers around the world had already mirrored it, dissected it, and posted transcripts across every platform. Within hours, the hashtag #Where is Jason Hawes trended worldwide. But the most disturbing part came from those who analyzed the background of the clip. On the wall behind Jason hung a framed print, an old map of New England, with 5 red dots marked across it. When those dots were compared with haunted locations from Jason's past investigations, the pattern was unmistakable. Each dot formed the shape of a pentagram, with the conjuring house directly at the center. And suddenly, Jason's final words made sense. Whatever he had uncovered, whatever the access point really was, it wasn't just paranormal. It was ritualistic, ancient, and deliberate. And if Jason Hawes was right, something had been waiting for someone like him to find it. By early 2025, the Jason Hawes story had gone beyond rumor. What started as a strange disappearance was turning into a full-blown conspiracy, and the deeper people dug, the more disturbing it became. Independent investigators began uncovering inconsistencies in official records. Phone logs, emails, and even property deeds connected to the conjuring house had been mysteriously altered. Jason's name had been scrubbed from several filings, replaced with a faceless corporation listed only as REM Holdings LLC, an entity traced to a P.O. box in Virginia. The same company had quietly purchased 2 other locations Jason had investigated years earlier. When one journalist attempted to contact the listed attorney for the company, they were told the information was classified. That's when whispers began spreading that this wasn't a cover-up by producers or networks, but by something much larger. Former insiders began speaking anonymously, claiming that Jason had stumbled onto a classified paranormal containment project, supposedly linked to federal research into unexplained phenomena dating back to the 1950s. Documents leaked through obscure forums referenced a secret program codenamed Eidolon, which allegedly investigated locations exhibiting dimensional interference. The files mentioned vibration patterns, low-frequency gateways, and energy anomalies synchronized through electromagnetic harmonics, the exact same language Jason used when describing the roots. The chilling implication was that the government wasn't trying to debunk ghosts at all. They were tracking them. One of the most shocking discoveries came from a retired technician who once worked for the Sci-Fi Channel during the early seasons of Ghost Hunters. He claimed that a military liaison occasionally reviewed certain episodes before airing, particularly those involving deep underground readings or unexplained electromagnetic spikes. "We thought it was legal clearance stuff," he said, "but sometimes they'd tell production to remove scenes that had nothing to do with privacy or liability. They didn't want the frequencies broadcast. They said it could reactivate something." At first, the statement seemed ridiculous, until viewers began analyzing old Ghost Hunters episodes. Some noticed peculiar distortions during certain EVPs, rhythmic pulses repeating every 41 seconds. When amplified, they formed a geometric sound pattern, identical to those found in ancient sigils associated with summoning rituals. Then, one night, a private investigator following the case posted a photo to social media that changed everything. It showed the inside of the conjuring house's basement, recently renovated, with massive copper wiring running along the floor. leading to a reinforced hatch in the center. Over it, faintly painted in red, were two words: containment seal. If the leaks were true, Jason's final warning was no metaphor. The hauntings weren't random. They were containment breaches. And if those seals ever failed, what had been sleeping beneath New England's haunted landscape might not stay buried for long. The government called it folklore. Skeptics called it hysteria. But Jason's followers had another name for it: the Root Awakening. And they believed that was exactly what had already begun.
Grant Wilson's 2012 departure from Ghost Hunters wasn't about spending time with family like he claimed. It was network exploitation demanding fake evidence, financial betrayal by Jason Hawes, a demonic investigation that followed him home, health crisis sci-fi forced him to hide, and legal battles to escape his contract. Subscribe now because the real story involves pay disparity, staged evidence pressure, marriage collapse, and the investigation that almost destroyed him. The truth has been buried under NDA for 13 years. The family time excuse was just the cover story they allowed him to tell. In October 2012, Grant Wilson made a public announcement that sent shockwaves through the paranormal investigation community and devastated millions of Ghost Hunters fans who had followed his work since the show premiered on Sci-Fi in 2004. Standing alongside his co-founder Jason Hawes in what appeared to be a carefully scripted joint statement, Grant explained that he was departing Ghost Hunters after 8 successful seasons to focus on what he described as his top priority: spending quality time with his 3 young sons and being present for his family in ways that the demanding filming and investigation schedule had prevented for nearly a decade. On the surface, this explanation seemed entirely reasonable and even admirable to fans and media outlets covering the announcement. Grant had been traveling an estimated 200 to 250 days per year for 8 consecutive years, crisscrossing the country to investigate haunted locations ranging from private residences to massive asylum complexes, historic hotels, and infamous paranormal hotspots. This grueling schedule meant missing countless birthdays, school events, soccer games, parent-teacher conferences, and everyday family moments that fathers typically cherish and children need for healthy development. The narrative Grant presented was one of a dedicated father reaching a point where he recognized his children were growing up without him and making the difficult but necessary choice to prioritize family over career at the peak of professional success. However, for those paying close attention to the circumstances surrounding Grant's departure, rather than simply accepting the official explanation at face value, numerous red flags suggested something far more complicated and darker was happening behind the carefully managed public relations messaging. The timing of his exit was the first major inconsistency that raised questions among industry insiders and observant fans. Grant didn't announce his departure at the conclusion of a season when natural transition points occur and contracts typically expire, allowing for smooth succession planning and proper farewell episodes. Instead, he quit abruptly mid-season with only a few weeks' notice to production, creating immediate logistical chaos for filming schedules, investigation planning, and contractual obligations to locations that had been booked months in advance, expecting the full TAPS team. The second red flag was visible in the final episodes featuring Grant that aired after his announcement but had been filmed weeks or months earlier. Careful viewers noticed that Grant appeared visibly uncomfortable, spoke minimally during team discussions, rarely interacted with Jason Hawes beyond absolutely necessary professional communication, and seemed emotionally detached from investigations in ways that contradicted his normally enthusiastic, engaged demeanor that had made him a fan favorite. Approximately 3 weeks before Grant Wilson submitted his resignation to Sci-Fi and informed Jason Hawes of his intention to leave Ghost Hunters permanently, the TAPS team conducted an investigation at an abandoned psychiatric hospital facility in central Massachusetts that has never been publicly identified, and whose footage was deemed too disturbing by network executives to ever air on television. According to individuals close to Grant who spoke confidentially about the experience years later after non-disclosure agreements expired, this investigation represented a psychological and spiritual breaking point that fundamentally altered Grant's perception of paranormal work and the dangers inherent in repeatedly exposing himself to locations housing malevolent entities. The psychiatric hospital had a documented history of patient abuse, unauthorized experimental treatments, and multiple deaths by suicide occurring within its walls during decades of operation before being condemned and abandoned in the 1990s. From the moment the team entered the facility for preliminary equipment setup, Grant reported experiencing overwhelming feelings of oppression, dread, and being watched by something intensely malevolent that seemed specifically focused on him rather than other team members. During the nighttime investigation, Grant was investigating a former patient isolation ward alone when he experienced what he later described in private conversations as a full demonic attack that involved physical sensations of being choked, extreme temperature drops localized around his body, and auditory phenomena including whispered threats in languages he didn't recognize. The experience was so traumatic that Grant called for immediate evacuation and refused to continue the investigation despite Jason and producers pressuring him to stay and capture more evidence. What made this incident truly devastating for Grant wasn't just the experience at the location itself, but what followed him home afterward. In the days and weeks following the psychiatric hospital investigation, Grant began experiencing disturbing phenomena at his own residence that terrified his family. He woke multiple mornings with unexplained scratches on his torso and arms that appeared overnight without any natural explanation. His children, particularly his youngest son, began reporting seeing shadow figures standing in doorways and at the foot of beds during nighttime hours. Grant suffered intense nightmares featuring the psychiatric hospital and patients who seemed to be trying to communicate warnings or threats. Most disturbing was the pervasive sense that something dark had attached itself to Grant and followed him home from Massachusetts, bringing malevolent energy into what should have been his family's safe sanctuary. Throughout 2011 and into 2012, tensions between Grant Wilson and Sci-Fi Network executives escalated dramatically over fundamental disagreements about the show's direction. The balance between genuine scientific investigation and manufactured entertainment drama, and the integrity of evidence presented to viewers as authentic paranormal phenomena. When Ghost Hunters premiered in 2004, the show distinguished itself from other paranormal programming through TAPS's commitment to skeptical, methodical investigation that debunked the majority of reported phenomena through natural explanations, while presenting the small percentage of genuinely unexplainable evidence with scientific objectivity. This approach resonated with audiences who were tired of sensationalized ghost shows, making extraordinary claims without rigorous analysis. However, as Ghost Hunters became one of Sci-Fi's highest-rated programs, generating substantial advertising revenue and building a dedicated fan base that supported merchandising and live event ticket sales, network executives began pushing aggressively for content changes designed to boost ratings through increased drama, conflict, and spectacular evidence captures, even if achieving these results required compromising investigative integrity. Producers began pressuring Grant and the team to emphasize interpersonal conflicts, manufacture disagreements about evidence interpretation, and present ambiguous findings as definitive proof of paranormal activity, rather than acknowledging uncertainty. Grant resisted these directives, arguing that TAPS had built its reputation on honesty and scientific rigor, and that betraying viewer trust by presenting fabricated drama or questionable evidence as genuine would ultimately destroy the credibility that made Ghost Hunters successful. The conflict reached a breaking point when Sci-Fi executives presented Grant and Jason with a proposed season finale script that included a staged physical altercation between the co-founders, where they would have a heated argument over evidence that escalates into pushing and shoving, creating dramatic tension and viral-worthy footage. Grant flatly refused to participate in this fabricated scene, stating that he would not deceive viewers by pretending to have conflicts that didn't exist, or by staging evidence disagreements for entertainment value. Network executives responded to Grant's refusal with thinly veiled threats about his future with the show, suggesting that investigators who weren't team players, willing to give producers the content they needed for ratings, success, might find themselves replaced by more cooperative personalities who understood that television was ultimately an entertainment business requiring certain creative liberties. Throughout the 8 years that Grant Wilson and Jason Hawes worked together as co-founders of TAPS and co-stars of Ghost Hunters, Grant operated under the fundamental assumption that their partnership was equal in every meaningful sense. Equal decision-making authority over investigations and team composition, equal creative input into show direction and episode content, and most importantly, equal financial compensation for the work they performed and the value they brought to the production. This assumption wasn't based on naive trust, but rather on explicit partnership agreements signed when TAPS was founded, and verbal assurances from Jason during contract negotiations with Sci-Fi that they would split all show-related income equally as partners who had built this enterprise together. However, in early 2012, Grant accidentally discovered documentation revealing that the financial arrangement he believed governed their partnership was far from the equal split he had been led to believe existed. During a production meeting at Sci-Fi offices where contracts and payment schedules were being discussed for the upcoming season, Grant happened to see accounting spreadsheets that were left on a conference table showing payment breakdowns for principal cast members. The numbers immediately struck Grant as wrong because the compensation listed for Jason Hawes was substantially higher, approximately 3 to 4 times larger, than the amounts Grant received for what he believed were equivalent roles. When Grant questioned the discrepancy, initially assuming it was an accounting error, he learned that Jason had negotiated separate compensation arrangements beyond their standard per-episode talent fees. These additional payments came through executive producer credits that entitled Jason to percentage points of profits, merchandising licensing agreements where Jason's name and likeness were licensed separately for products, personal appearance fees at conventions and events that weren't shared equally, and consulting fees paid by Sci-Fi for input on show development that Grant had been providing equally but wasn't receiving separate compensation for. The realization that for 8 years, while Grant believed they were making equal money as partners, Jason was actually receiving several times more income through these separate deals that Grant had never been informed about or offered participation in, felt like a devastating betrayal of their friendship and partnership. When Grant confronted Jason directly about the financial disparity and questioned why these arrangements had been hidden from him, Jason's response was that these were separate business opportunities he had pursued independently that weren't part of their TAPS partnership agreement. While Grant Wilson publicly cited family time as his reason for leaving Ghost Hunters, the deeper truth was that by the time he made his departure announcement in October 2012, his marriage had already collapsed under the relentless pressure of his paranormal investigation career, and he was actively navigating a painful divorce that would become final within months. The warning signs had been accumulating for years but reached a critical breaking point in early 2012 when Grant's wife, who had endured nearly a decade of essentially functioning as a single parent while her husband traveled 200+ days annually, issued an ultimatum that forced Grant to confront the unsustainable reality of trying to maintain both his Ghost Hunters career and his family relationships. The strain on Grant's marriage stemmed from multiple intersecting factors that compounded over time. The obvious issue was physical absence. Grant spent more nights per year in hotels near investigation locations than he spent sleeping in his own bed at home with his wife. This meant his wife managed school pickups and drop-offs, helped with homework, attended soccer games and school plays, handled discipline and parenting decisions, managed household repairs and emergencies, and navigated all the daily complexities of raising 3 young boys essentially alone while Grant was investigating haunted asylums across the country. Beyond mere absence, Grant's work created additional stresses that invaded their home life even during the limited time he was physically present. The paranormal experiences Grant encountered during investigations didn't always stay at the locations being investigated. As detailed in the psychiatric hospital incident and numerous other cases, Grant occasionally brought home spiritual attachments or negative energy that manifested as unexplained phenomena in the family residence. His wife reported feeling uncomfortable in their own home, experiencing cold spots and unexplained sounds, and most distressingly, their children began reporting seeing shadow figures and experiencing nightmares after particularly intense investigations Grant returned from. The psychological toll extended beyond paranormal phenomena to include Grant's emotional unavailability even when physically present. The stress of constant travel, the lack of normal sleep patterns, the accumulated trauma from witnessing disturbing locations and experiencing frightening phenomena, and the pressure of performing for cameras while maintaining investigative integrity left Grant mentally exhausted and emotionally distant. His wife described feeling like she was living with a stranger during his brief periods home, someone who was physically present but psychologically absent, unable to engage fully with family life because he was always mentally preparing for the next investigation or recovering from the previous one. By 2011 and into 2012, Grant Wilson was experiencing serious health problems that directly resulted from 8 years of investigating toxic, dangerous locations without adequate safety equipment or proper medical protocols, combined with the chronic stress of maintaining an unsustainable filming schedule that prioritized production deadlines over personal well-being. The health issues manifested across multiple systems in Grant's body, creating a cascade of medical concerns that doctors warned were putting him at significant risk for life-threatening complications if he didn't make immediate and dramatic lifestyle changes. The most acute problem involved respiratory issues that developed from repeated exposure to mold, asbestos, lead paint dust, and other airborne contaminants present in the abandoned buildings, derelict hospitals, and condemned structures that ghost hunters investigated regularly. Grant began experiencing persistent coughing, shortness of breath during physical exertion, and recurring respiratory infections that required multiple rounds of antibiotics to clear. Pulmonary function tests revealed measurable decline in lung capacity, and his physician explicitly warned that continued exposure to toxic environments without proper respiratory protection equipment would cause permanent lung damage that could affect his quality of life for decades. Beyond respiratory concerns, Grant developed severe chronic fatigue and immune system dysfunction that his doctors attributed to years of disrupted sleep patterns, constant travel across time zones, inadequate nutrition while filming on location, and the relentless stress of performing under production pressure while maintaining investigative standards. Grant's immune system became so compromised that he caught every cold and flu virus circulating, took weeks to recover from illnesses that healthy adults shake off in days, and developed recurring skin infections that suggested his body's natural defenses had been worn down to dangerous levels. Most alarming from a long-term health perspective were the anxiety and panic attacks that began occurring with increasing frequency during 2011 and 2012. Grant, who had always prided himself on maintaining calm professionalism during investigations regardless of how frightening the phenomena encountered, started experiencing episodes of overwhelming panic, rapid heartbeat, chest tightness, and difficulty breathing that would strike without warning during investigations or even during routine daily activities. A cardiologist who evaluated Grant after one particularly severe episode that sent him to an emergency room ran comprehensive cardiac testing and delivered a sobering assessment. Grant's chronic stress levels, elevated cortisol, high blood pressure, and anxiety symptoms were putting him at significantly elevated risk for heart attack or stroke before age 45 if he didn't make immediate changes to reduce stress exposure. By 2011 and into 2012, the internal dynamics within the TAPS team had deteriorated significantly from the collegial, mission-driven organization that Grant Wilson and Jason Hawes had founded years earlier with the stated purpose of conducting serious, scientific paranormal investigation that prioritized evidence integrity over entertainment value or personal gain. The fractures within the team stemmed from multiple sources of tension that had been building gradually, but reached breaking points that made Grant question whether he could continue working with people who no longer shared his fundamental values about investigative methodology and ethical standards. Steve Gonsalves and Dave Tango, who had been with TAPS since the early days and appeared regularly on Ghost Hunters as tech specialists and investigators, harbored growing resentment that despite carrying substantial investigative workload and developing loyal fan followings that contributed to the show's success, they had virtually no decision-making authority over case selection, investigation strategies, or team direction. All major decisions flowed through Grant and Jason as co-founders, leaving Steve and Dave feeling like skilled employees rather than valued partners even after years of dedication to TAPS and the show. This resentment occasionally surfaced in passive-aggressive behavior, resistance to Grant's investigative instructions, and complaints to producers about being underutilized or undervalued. The situation was further complicated by newer team members who had been hired not through TAPS's traditional recruitment based on investigative skills and commitment to scientific methodology, but rather through Sci-Fi's casting process that prioritized personalities who would create good television drama and follow producer directions over investigators who might resist network pressure to manufacture content. These network-selected team members understood that their continued employment depended on pleasing producers and delivering the dramatic moments and evidence captures that boosted ratings, creating fundamental conflicts of loyalty and methodology within the team. The breaking point for Grant came during an investigation where he discovered that certain team members had been staging evidence, deliberately creating sounds, moving objects or manipulating equipment to produce false positive readings, because they felt pressure from producers to deliver exciting evidence that would justify the episode and secure their positions on future investigations. When Grant confronted these individuals and brought the evidence fabrication to Jason's attention, expecting immediate dismissal of anyone compromising Tapps's investigative integrity, he was shocked by Jason's response, suggesting they handle it quietly without making it a major issue. When Grant Wilson made the personal decision that he needed to leave Ghost Hunters to protect his health, save what remained of his family relationships, and escape an increasingly toxic work environment that had strayed far from the investigative integrity that originally motivated his paranormal research, he discovered that actually extricating himself from the show would be far more complicated than simply submitting a resignation letter and walking away. Grant's employment relationship with Ghost Hunters was governed by complex contracts that he had signed years earlier during initial negotiations when the show was first being developed, followed by multiple contract extensions and renewals that occurred as the show's success grew and Sci-Fi invested more heavily in production. When Grant reviewed these contracts with his attorney in early 2012 after deciding he needed to quit, he discovered concerning language in the fine print that he either hadn't fully understood during original signing or that had been added during subsequent renewals without him recognizing the implications. Specifically, Grant learned that his most recent contract renewal, which he had signed during Season 7 negotiations, contained automatic extension clauses that bound him to the show for longer than he realized. Under these contractual provisions, Grant couldn't simply quit Ghost Hunters when he personally decided he was done. He was legally obligated to continue appearing on the show, participating in investigations, and fulfilling production requirements through specific dates that extended well beyond the time frame he had mentally committed to. When Grant informed Sci-Fi executives and production company representatives that he intended to leave the show despite the contractual obligations, their initial response was absolute refusal to release him from his agreement. Network lawyers sent formal letters reminding Grant of his contractual commitments and warning that walking away from the show before his contract expired would constitute material breach of agreement, exposing him to substantial financial liability. The threatened damages weren't merely symbolic. Sci-Fi indicated they could sue Grant for multi-million-dollar amounts representing lost advertising revenue, production costs for episodes that would need to be canceled or restructured, and damages to the show's brand value from losing one of its two co-stars and co-founders. These legal threats created an impossible situation where Grant felt trapped in a job that was destroying his health, had already cost him his marriage, and required him to continue working with people he no longer trusted while maintaining public pretense that everything was fine. Grant walked away from $500,000 plus annual income, lost his friendship with Jason, sacrificed platform and influence, faced financial struggles during divorce, endured public criticism from fans who felt abandoned. But he gained, rebuilt relationship with his sons, health improved dramatically within a year, rediscovered passion for investigation without network pressure, maintained integrity by refusing to fake evidence, and his 7-year absence made his 2019 return to Ghost Hunters on his own terms more powerful. Leaving was the best decision of his life, even though it was the hardest. Grant Wilson co-founded Taps with Jason Hawes and created Ghost Hunters in 2004. The show pioneered modern paranormal television and ran successfully for 11 seasons, then suddenly canceled in 2016. Official reason: creative differences. But fans never believed it. Something happened that Sci-Fi buried. One investigation went catastrophically wrong. Footage was banned from ever airing, until last week when Grant Wilson leaked it. Subscribe, because what's on that footage will shock you. A crew member's death caught on camera. Genuine possession documented. The investigation that ended Ghost Hunters forever. Marcus Reynolds died on August 23, 2016 during filming. Sci-Fi covered it up. His family was silenced. The show was canceled to bury the truth. But Grant just released 9 minutes of footage showing exactly what happened, and it's darker than anyone thought. Ghost Hunters premiered in October 2004 on Sci-Fi, created by Jason Hawes and Grant Wilson, two plumbers from Rhode Island who founded TAPS, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. The show revolutionized paranormal television by introducing a scientific approach to ghost hunting. Unlike sensationalized shows, Ghost Hunters focused on debunking first and finding genuine evidence second. This credible methodology made paranormal investigation mainstream and attracted millions of viewers, peaking at over 3 million per episode during its height. The original team dynamic was perfectly balanced. Jason Hawes served as lead investigator with his analytical, skeptical approach. Grant Wilson was co-lead, bringing calm professionalism and empathy. Steve Gonsalves managed technology and equipment. Dave Tango served as case manager. The chemistry was authentic, the investigations felt real, and the content remained family-friendly. Ghost Hunters built a trustworthy brand that changed how America viewed the paranormal. The show's success from 2004 to 2015 was unprecedented. 11 successful seasons aired with international spin-offs created, including Ghost Hunters International and Ghost Hunters Academy. Massive merchandising followed with books, equipment, and convention appearances. The show inspired an entire generation of paranormal investigators and legitimized the field. Grant Wilson's departure in 2010 during Season 8 shocked fans. The official reason given was spending time with family, but fans always suspected more. The show continued without Grant with Jason as sole lead, but the chemistry was never the same. New team members were added, including Amy Bruni and Adam Berry, and while ratings gradually declined, the show remained successful and profitable. The shocking cancellation came in October 2016 after Season 11. Sci-Fi announced, "Ghost Hunters will not return," with vague reasoning about it being time to end the series. There was no proper finale episode, no goodbye to fans who had watched for 12 years. This was very unusual for such a successful franchise. Something was clearly wrong. The banned episode was Season 11, Episode 13, filmed in August 2016. The episode was titled The Warren House and documented an investigation at a private residence in rural Pennsylvania. It was scheduled as the season finale but was pulled 3 days before the air date and never aired. The investigation involved a historic home where a family was experiencing extreme paranormal activity, including physical attacks on their children. A demonic presence was suspected. Taps was brought in as a last resort after a priest's attempted exorcism had made the activity worse. The family was desperate for help, and the Ghost Hunters team believed their 11 seasons of experience had prepared them for anything. They were tragically wrong. During the investigation's second night, everything went catastrophically wrong. A camera operator named Marcus Reynolds, 34 years old and an experienced crew member who had worked on Ghost Hunters for 6 years, was filming routine footage in the basement alone. This was standard protocol for solo investigations. Then he screamed, not acted fear, but genuine terror. The team rushed to the basement and found Marcus unconscious and not breathing. CPR was performed immediately and 911 was called. The ambulance arrived 18 minutes later due to the rural location being far from the hospital. Marcus never regained consciousness. He was pronounced dead at the hospital at 2:47 a.m. on August 23, 2016. The cause of death was cardiac arrest, but Marcus was healthy with no medical history. He was only 34 years old. Medical examiners were baffled. Marcus's camera was still recording during his final moments. Everything was documented on film. What he saw before dying, his physical reaction, the possession that occurred, all captured in disturbing detail. The footage was too graphic and disturbing to air on television. Sci-Fi's response was immediate. Production was shut down completely. The episode was canceled. An internal investigation was launched. The legal team was activated. The insurance company got involved. OSHA was notified. The crew was sent home. Marcus's family was devastated and left without answers. The legal nightmare was massive. Wrongful death concerns arose immediately. Marcus's family could potentially sue for dangerous working conditions. The network was potentially liable for millions. The production company was exposed. The insurance company denied coverage, invoking their paranormal activity exclusion clause. Potential damages could reach tens of millions of dollars. Network executives held emergency meetings and made a decision. The episode will never air. All footage must be destroyed. NDA, everyone immediately. They needed to protect the brand, protect from lawsuits, bury all evidence, and pretend the incident never happened. The entire show was canceled because the liability was too great. Continuing Ghost Hunters after a crew member's death would invite public questions. Insurance wouldn't cover future investigations. The crew was traumatized. Jason Hawes was devastated by guilt. They couldn't investigate the same way anymore. It was better to end the show completely than risk another tragedy. The official narrative became, the show ran its course. Time to move on after 11 successful seasons, ending on a high note. There was no mention of Marcus's death, no mention of the banned episode. Marcus's family was paid a settlement that included a strict NDA preventing them from discussing how he died, where he died, or during what production. Every crew member was forced to sign NDAs, Jason, Steve, Tango, all production staff, and Marcus's family. All were legally bound never to discuss the incident, never to mention Marcus's name, and never to reveal that footage existed. Grant Wilson held a unique position. He had left the show 6 years before the incident and wasn't present for the investigation, so he wasn't bound by any NDAs. However, Jason told him everything off the record, friend to friend. Grant kept the secret for years to protect Jason. The footage appeared online 1 week ago through an anonymous upload to multiple platforms simultaneously. 9 minutes of raw footage from Marcus's camera went immediately viral, with millions of views within hours. Sci-Fi is attempting to remove it everywhere through copyright strikes, but it's spreading too fast to contain. The opening sequence shows Marcus in the basement alone, setting up his night vision camera and providing casual commentary. Basement is pretty creepy down here. It's standard Ghost Hunters footage with nothing unusual yet, just routine investigation with no warning of the horror to come. At the 1-minute mark, the first anomaly occurs. Temperature drops become visible as Marcus's breath suddenly shows in the camera frame. "Whoa, it just got really cold," he says. The camera picks up frost forming rapidly on the walls and ceiling within seconds, not gradually. Marcus notices but continues filming professionally. During an EVP session at 2 minutes, Marcus asks, "Is anyone here with me?" A response comes immediately. A deep male voice that is clearly not Marcus saying, "Get out." Marcus is startled but continues the investigation. The escalation begins at 3 minutes. Objects start moving on their own. A chair slides across the floor with no one touching it. Shelves shake violently and items fall. Marcus backs away, saying, "Okay, this is getting really intense," but still maintains professionalism and keeps filming. At 4 minutes, the attack begins. Marcus is suddenly grabbed by an invisible force and pulled backwards violently, then slammed into the wall. His camera falls and captures everything sideways. Marcus is visible in the frame on the ground, struggling as something invisible holds him down. The possession occurs from 5 to 7 minutes. Marcus's body convulses, not like a seizure, but something else entirely. His face contorts unnaturally. His voice changes completely and he begins speaking in a different language later identified as Latin. His eyes roll back and it's clear that Marcus is no longer in control of his own body. The entity speaks through Marcus's mouth from 7 to 8 minutes. The voice is deep and inhuman, saying, "This one is mine," and laughing while taunting whoever might be watching. Marcus's body moves in ways that are physically wrong, with bones cracking audibly. The final moments from 8 to 9 minutes show Marcus suddenly becoming still in complete silence. Then he begins gasping, trying desperately to breathe but cannot. His hand reaches toward the camera, scratching at his own throat. Then he collapses completely. The discovery happens as footsteps are heard on the stairs. The team arrives yelling, "Marcus! Marcus!" The camera shows Jason Hawes entering the frame and finding Marcus unconscious. "Call 911 now!" Jason begins CPR immediately as the footage ends abruptly. Jason Hawes was the first to reach Marcus in the basement. He immediately began performing CPR with his training kicking in automatically, but Marcus wasn't responding. Jason's voice is captured on camera saying, "Come on, buddy, breathe," with desperation breaking through his professional veneer. He rode in the ambulance to the hospital and was there when Marcus was pronounced dead. Jason had to make the phone call to Marcus's wife, Sarah, which he later described as the worst moment of his life. "I brought him there," Jason said, consumed by survivor's guilt. He couldn't eat for days and still has nightmares about that night. Steve Gonsalves also rushed to the basement and witnessed the CPR attempts. He called 911 and stayed calm during the emergency but broke down completely afterward. "Marcus was my friend," Steve said. The experience made him question everything about what they were really doing investigating the paranormal. Dave Tango, the youngest team member, had never witnessed death before. He was completely shaken, saying this was supposed to be safe. He left paranormal investigation entirely for several years, unable to process what happened. The experience changed him permanently. Multiple camera crew members quit immediately after the incident. "Not worth dying for," they said. Some needed professional therapy for PTSD symptoms. They couldn't watch the footage and couldn't continue filming paranormal investigations. Word spread quietly through the industry about what really happened. Marcus Reynolds' family was devastated. His wife Sarah and 2 young children couldn't understand how a healthy 34-year-old man suddenly died. The autopsy showed cardiac arrest, but there was no underlying medical condition. The medical examiner was baffled by the case. Sci-Fi paid the family an undisclosed settlement reportedly exceeding $2 million, but it came with a strict NDA. The family couldn't speak publicly about how Marcus died, where it happened, or during what show production. Their silence was bought. The funeral was attended by the entire Ghost Hunters team in a private ceremony. They couldn't explain to others how Marcus really died, using only the generic explanation, accident on set, while everyone present knew the horrifying truth, but was unable to speak it. Grant Wilson received a call from Jason, even though Grant had left the show years earlier. They were still friends, and Jason needed to tell someone who wasn't bound by the NDA. Grant listened to everything and kept Jason's confidence for years, carrying the burden of that knowledge silently. Sci-Fi was alerted within hours of the footage appearing online. The legal team was activated immediately, and crisis management mode began. Copyright strikes were filed and removal requests sent everywhere, including YouTube, Twitter, and Facebook. But the footage was spreading too fast to contain effectively. The official Sci-Fi statement was carefully worded: unauthorized footage release. Never approved for broadcast. Tragic incident from 2016. Thoughts with Marcus Reynolds' family. Taking legal action against whoever leaked. This was the first public acknowledgement of what really happened to Marcus Reynolds. Legal threats followed immediately. Sci-Fi began investigating the leak source, examining everyone who had access, including original crew members, production staff, and network executives. All denied involvement. Forensic analysis of the uploaded file is ongoing. NDA violations carry serious consequences, including potential lawsuits, financial penalties, career destruction, and possibly criminal charges. Everyone suspects Grant Wilson leaked the footage. He's the only person with clear motive and wasn't bound by any NDA. He had access through Jason, who might have shared the file years ago. Grant is known for his integrity and would leak based on principle, not malice. Grant's response on social media was cryptic but revealing. Some truths need telling. Marcus Reynolds deserves to be remembered for what really happened, not the network's sanitized version. This wasn't quite an admission, but heavily implied his involvement, making Sci-Fi furious. The impact on the Ghost Hunters brand has been severe. A reboot launched in 2019 without Jason or Grant, but now the franchise is associated with death. Sponsors are concerned and advertisers are pulling out. The reboot may be canceled permanently. The legacy is tarnished and the brand possibly dead. Jason Hawes was forced to comment publicly. Marcus was family. What happened haunts me every day. The footage should have stayed private, but I understand why it was released. His conflicted feelings are obvious. Anger at the leak, but validation that it happened. Sarah Reynolds, Marcus's wife, spoke for the first time, breaking her own NDA. My husband died. People deserve to know why. I'm not ashamed anymore. I thank whoever leaked this footage. It was a powerful statement that changed the narrative completely. Public reaction has been massive. The paranormal community calls it the most disturbing footage ever captured that proves the paranormal can kill. Skeptics claim it's fake, but medical records exist. The death certificate is public, and Marcus Reynolds really died. The footage shows exactly how. The Warren house was built in 1887 in rural Pennsylvania by the Warren family. 7 children lived in the home, but 4 died there under suspicious circumstances. A 7-year-old daughter fell downstairs in 1892. A 5-year-old son drowned in the well in 1895. A 12-year-old daughter died of wasting illness in 1901, and a 9-year-old son was attacked by wild animal in 1903. The parents lived to old age but died elsewhere, leaving the house to their eldest son. The 20th century brought more tragedies. In 1923, a new owner committed suicide in the basement. In 1947, a husband murdered his wife in the same basement. A house fire in 1968 killed 1 person. In 1989, the previous owner was found dead with no clear cause. The house remained empty until 2013, when the current family moved in. The young couple with 2 children bought the house cheaply, knowing its dark history. They thought they could handle it. Activity started immediately, with children reporting invisible friends that quickly turned malevolent. Physical attacks followed, leaving the family desperate for help. Previous paranormal investigation teams had tried investigating, but all left quickly. Equipment failures plagued every attempt. Team members became ill. One investigator was hospitalized and diagnosed with psychosis after spending just 1 night in the house. A Catholic priest was contacted to perform a blessing, but the activity intensified dramatically. He returned for a formal exorcism, but the ritual was interrupted when the priest was physically thrown across the room, breaking his arm. He refused to ever return to the property. TAPS took the case because the family had nowhere else to turn. Ghost hunters had built a reputation over 11 seasons and hundreds of investigations. They had never lost anyone and believed their experience had prepared them for anything. They were tragically wrong. They should have listened to the warnings from locals who said, "That house wants blood and takes one every generation." The basement was the epicenter of all activity. 2 murders were committed there, a suicide occurred there, and residual energy or intelligent haunting or demonic presence created a perfect storm of evil. Marcus Reynolds became the latest victim of the Warren House curse. Multiple forensic video analysts examined the footage frame by frame, searching for CGI or editing. No evidence of tampering was found. Timestamps verified as authentic, metadata checked out, and camera angles remained consistent throughout. Expert consensus: footage is genuine and unmanipulated. Dr. Patricia Morris, a forensic pathologist, reviewed Marcus's autopsy report and stated, "Cardiac arrest confirmed. No underlying disease detected. Stress-induced cardiac arrest is possible. Extreme fear can literally stop the heart." A medical explanation exists for Marcus's death. Demonologist John Zaffis, with over 40 years of experience, reviewed the footage extensively. This is classic demonic possession. The voice change is consistent with documented cases. The physical manifestation is extreme but has been documented before. This was genuine possession. Linguists analyzed the audio and identified that Marcus spoke Latin phrases during the possession. Marcus didn't know Latin. The phrases translated to demonic invocations including, "I claim this vessel," and "Death comes." These are ancient evil incantations. Body language experts analyzed Marcus's contortions, noting his joints bent in ways not humanly possible without causing severe injury. Yet no pain was visible on his face because he wasn't in control. Something else was moving his body. Voice comparison analysis showed Marcus's normal voice versus the possessed voice were completely different. Frequency analysis concluded not the same vocal cords producing these sounds. Physically impossible. 2 different sources speaking. Cardiac specialists confirmed that extreme stress can cause sudden cardiac arrest in healthy individuals through Takotsubo cardiomyopathy or broken heart syndrome. Marcus's symptoms match this condition perfectly. Fear literally killed him. Steve Gonsalves, former Ghost Hunters crew member, commented publicly, "The footage shows exactly what happened. Marcus died investigating the paranormal. We all knew there were risks, but never thought someone would actually die. This changed everything about how we viewed our work." Skeptics claim this is an elaborate hoax, but the death certificate is verified, the autopsy report is real, the medical examiner is legitimate, and there are too many witnesses. Marcus's family's grief is genuine. The network's aggressive response proves authenticity. It can't all be fabricated. The consensus among experts: the footage shows a real event. Marcus Reynolds really died during a Ghost Hunters investigation. Whether the cause was paranormal is debatable, but the death itself is undeniable. The footage is authentic, and the leak reveals truth the network desperately tried to bury. In 2016, when Marcus died, Grant Wilson had already left Ghost Hunters 6 years earlier. He had built a new life away from the show but remained friends with Jason Hawes. The night Marcus died, Jason called Grant and told him everything. Grant carried the burden of that knowledge for 8 years, watching the show get canceled and seeing the official story while knowing it was a lie. He watched Marcus's family suffer in silence, unable to speak the truth. Grant didn't leak the footage sooner out of loyalty to Jason. Jason had asked him, "Please don't say anything," and Grant respected that for years because Jason's career was at stake. But something changed when Ghost Hunters was rebooted in 2019 with a new team taking the same risks and going to dangerous locations. Grant feared someone else will die and contacted Jason saying, "We need to tell people." Jason refused. Grant's moral struggle intensified. Loyalty to Jason versus public safety. If someone else dies because we stayed quiet, I couldn't live with that, Grant realized. His decision was made. Principle over friendship, truth over loyalty. Jason had shared the footage with Grant years ago in confidence, "So you understand." Grant kept a copy but never intended to leak it until the reboot was renewed for Season 5 with increasingly dangerous locations planned. Grant's conscience wouldn't allow silence when lives were at risk. After the leak, Grant posted a full explanation. Marcus Reynolds died August 23, 2016, investigating for Ghost Hunters. The network buried the truth to protect their brand. His family was silenced with money. That ends now. Marcus's wife, Sarah Reynolds, supported the leak, breaking her own NDA and giving Grant courage to act. The consequences Grant faces include a possible lawsuit from Sci-Fi, even though he had no NDA to violate. Jason might never forgive him, destroying their friendship completely. The paranormal community is divided, with some supporting his transparency and others condemning the betrayal. Grant has accepted all consequences, stating, "I did the right thing. Marcus deserves to be remembered. If this leak prevents another death, it was worth destroying my friendship with Jason and risking everything else." His motivation was clear. The Ghost Hunters reboot put new investigators at risk. Without knowing what happened to Marcus, they couldn't understand the real dangers. Grant couldn't stay quiet when lives hung in the balance. Truth and safety mattered more than loyalty or personal consequences. Sci-Fi is exploring legal options against Grant, but he had no NDA. Jason released a statement saying, "Grant betrayed my trust, but also, Marcus deserves to be remembered." Their friendship is over. The Ghost Hunters reboot was canceled immediately with Season 5 pulled. Sarah Reynolds is suing Sci-Fi for wrongful death despite the settlement. The industry is implementing new safety protocols. The Warren house is scheduled for demolition next month. Grant has no regrets. "I leaked that footage because Marcus mattered. His death mattered. Truth matters more than loyalty. Some secrets kill. This one already did. I won't let it kill again." Grant Wilson co-founded TAPS with Jason Hawes in 1990. Together, they created Ghost Hunters in 2004. The show revolutionized paranormal television, made ghost hunting mainstream. Grant and Jason were inseparable, best friends for over a decade, built an empire together. Then in May 2010, shocking announcement. Grant Wilson was leaving Ghost Hunters. The official reason, spending time with family. Fans never believed it. Something else happened. Something Grant couldn't talk about, until now. Subscribe, because after 13 years of silence, Grant is finally ready to reveal the complete truth. What really happened with Jason. The network pressure that changed everything. The incident that was the final straw. Why family reasons was true but incomplete. The contracts that kept him quiet. And the real reason he walked away from millions. This is what Grant Wilson has never been allowed to say. Until today. Grant Wilson and Jason Hawes met in the 1990s working as plumbers in Warwick, Rhode Island. They discovered a shared interest in the paranormal and founded TAPS in 1990, the Atlantic Paranormal Society. Just two guys with basic equipment investigating local hauntings for free. No money, just passion for helping people. They became best friends. More than business partners. Their families became close. They spent holidays together. Their kids grew up together. The trust between them was absolute. Everyone said they were like brothers. In 2003, television producers approached TAPS about creating a paranormal reality show. The timing was perfect as reality TV was exploding. Ghost Hunters premiered on Sci-Fi in October 2004 with Grant and Jason as equal co-leads. The success was immediate and exceeded all expectations. Within months, Ghost Hunters became Sci-Fi's flagship program with millions of viewers weekly. The show spawned Ghost Hunters International, generated massive merchandise sales, book deals, and made the convention circuit boom. TAPS became world famous. Grant and Jason became stars. The on-screen dynamic was perfect. Grant was calm and analytical, the believer who approached evidence with wonder. Jason was aggressive and skeptical, questioning everything. Their chemistry was undeniable because their friendship was genuine. Audiences loved watching their real relationship play out on television. The partnership translated authentically to viewers. Financial success followed quickly. The show generated millions in revenue. Both Grant and Jason were earning far beyond plumber salaries through speaking fees, appearances, book deals, endorsements, TAPS training programs, and equipment sales. They were living a dream they never imagined possible. The peak years from 2006 to 2008 saw Ghost Hunters at the height of popularity with consistently strong ratings and critical acclaim in the paranormal community. The show legitimized ghost hunting as a field. Other programs copied their format. Grant and Jason seemed on top of the world together. The partnership appeared stronger than ever. But behind the scenes, cracks were already forming. The long filming schedules meant weeks away from families. Financial disputes were beginning. Creative differences emerged. Network pressure increased. Success was bringing unexpected stress. Small disagreements were becoming bigger conflicts. The foundation they built together was starting to shake. Neither recognized how serious the problems would become. By 2008, the creative control battle had begun. Sci-Fi wanted more dramatic content to boost ratings. Jason was willing to compromise to keep the network happy. Grant pushed back hard, insisting on authenticity. "We're here to investigate, not perform," he argued repeatedly. Disagreements in production meetings became heated. Grant felt outvoted on every decision. Jason sided with producers more frequently. They had fundamental differences in priorities that couldn't be reconciled. Fame changed their dynamics significantly. Jason embraced celebrity status and loved the convention spotlight. Grant was uncomfortable with attention and preferred a low-key approach. They were growing apart personally, not just professionally. This wasn't just business anymore. It was affecting their friendship. Financial disputes created serious tension. Questions arose about profit distribution, taps revenue versus show revenue, who owned what rights, and how merchandising deals were structured. Grant felt shortchanged. Lawyers got involved. The trust that had been absolute began eroding. Money was changing their relationship in ways neither anticipated. Decision-making power shifted dramatically. Jason became the de facto leader. Grant's input was valued less and less. The Jason's show narrative formed within the network. Grant was relegated to second position. They weren't equal partners anymore. Frustration built into resentment. The partnership became unbalanced and unhealthy. Grant's personal life was suffering severely. His family rarely saw him. His marriage was strained by constant travel. He was missing his children growing up, including school events and birthdays. His wife expressed serious concerns. "This isn't sustainable," she told him repeatedly. Work-life balance was completely destroyed. Something had to give. In early 2009, Grant approached Jason directly. "We need to reduce the filming schedule," he said. Jason's response was firm. "That's not possible. The network has demands. We have contract obligations. We can't slow down now." Grant felt trapped. This conversation made him realize they wanted completely different things from ghost hunters and from life. A philosophical divide had emerged. Grant believed this should be about helping people. Jason countered, "This is a business now." Grant wanted authentic investigations. Jason understood TV needs drama. Grant prioritized evidence quality. Jason prioritized viewer entertainment. Both had valid points, but they couldn't reconcile them anymore. The tipping point came in spring 2009 during a specific investigation. Grant found compelling evidence, but the network wanted to edit it differently for dramatic effect. Jason supported the network's version over Grant's objections. Grant felt the evidence was misrepresented. They had a public argument on set. The crew witnessed the tension. Their relationship was damaged irreparably. After that argument, Grant and Jason barely spoke. In 2009, Sci-Fi was rebranding from Sci-Fi Channel with new executives bringing a different vision. They wanted ghost hunters to evolve, which meant more drama and less authentic investigation. Grant opposed this direction completely. The network didn't care about his opinion. The message was clear: adapt or be replaced. The script controversy emerged as a major conflict. Sci-Fi wanted more structured episodes and suggested scripting certain reactions. "Just enhance what's already there," producers said. Grant adamantly refused. "That's not what we do. We're real investigators." The network grew frustrated with his resistance, while Jason showed more willingness to compromise. Production schedule demands became unsustainable. The network wanted 26 episodes per season, plus Ghost Hunters' international involvement, plus live Halloween specials, plus convention appearances. This meant filming nearly year-round. Grant had young children at home. The schedule was destroying his family life. The network wouldn't reduce the commitment regardless of personal circumstances. Evidence manipulation became Grant's biggest concern. He discovered that editing made evidence look more dramatic than reality. Sound effects were added in post-production. Enhancements were made to footage without his knowledge. Grant would learn about these changes only after episodes aired. He felt his integrity was being compromised. When he confronted producers, they told him bluntly, "This makes good TV. Accept it or leave." Every episode was analyzed for ratings. Investigations were chosen for drama potential rather than paranormal legitimacy. "This location will get better ratings," producers would say. Grant wanted to help genuine clients with real problems. The network wanted entertainment value above all else. This created constant conflict over locations and approaches. Grant was losing every single battle. In late 2009, Grant's contract came up for renewal. The network offered new terms, more episodes for the same pay structure with less creative input. Grant wanted the opposite, fewer episodes with more control over content. The network's response was simple: no, take it or leave it. A meeting was arranged with network executives. Grant presented his concerns with a list of needed changes: better schedule, authentic investigations, creative input respected, and evidence integrity maintained. The network's response to every point was no. Then came the ultimatum: sign the contract or walk away. Grant faced an impossible position. Signing meant accepting everything he opposed. Walking away meant leaving the show he created, abandoning the TAPS partnership and losing substantial income. But it also meant keeping his integrity, respecting the investigative work, and honoring why he started in the first place. The decision became painfully clear. Grant expected Jason's support against the network. "We built this together," he thought. But Jason sided with the network completely. "We have to be realistic. This is how television works. You're being too rigid." The betrayal Grant felt in that moment was devastating. His partner was choosing the network over him. In 2010, Grant Wilson had young elementary school-aged children. His wife was managing everything alone, while Grant was on the road over 250 days per year. He would be home for days, then gone for weeks. The pattern was destroying his family. His marriage was under serious strain, approaching a breaking point. The missed moments accumulated painfully. First day of school, filming, birthday parties, convention appearances, school plays, investigations scheduled, sports games, network commitments. Holidays were often spent working, anniversaries forgotten multiple times. His kids asked constantly, "When's Dad coming home?" His wife's patience was running out. In December 2009, Grant had a serious conversation with his wife about their future. "This can't continue," she said clearly. "You have to choose." It wasn't an ultimatum, just reality. Their family was falling apart. The kids were growing up without him. Their marriage was becoming a business arrangement. Something had to change immediately. Grant faced internal conflict. He loved the paranormal work and believed in TAPS's mission, but he also loved his family. He recognized what he was losing. "I can't get these years back. Kids are only young once. Success is meaningless if my family is destroyed." His priorities were becoming painfully clear. The financial concern was real. Ghost Hunter's income was substantial. His family depended on that income. Leaving meant a significant pay cut with no guarantee of future work. He would be risking his family's financial security to save their emotional security. It was a difficult calculation, but a necessary one. Family reasons was true, but incomplete. Yes, Grant desperately wanted time with family, but he also couldn't continue under the network's terms. His relationship with Jason was broken. His creative integrity was compromised. Family was the primary reason, but not the only reason. Saying family reasons was easier than explaining everything. The public wouldn't understand the full complexity. Grant faced harsh criticism from fans. "Abandoning the show. Family is just an excuse. You're letting everyone down." Grant couldn't defend himself fully. He couldn't explain the real complexity. He had to accept being seen as the villain for the sake of all relationships involved. What Grant gave up was immense. Multi-million-dollar income, national television platform, celebrity status, work he was passionate about, and the partnership he valued, all to be present for his family. In March 2010, everything converged. Contract renegotiation was stalled. Tension with Jason had peaked. Network pressure was intensifying. Grant's family situation was critical. He was on edge. One more thing would break him. That thing happened. Grant was excited about a specific investigation. The location had genuine paranormal activity reported. A family desperately needed help. Grant connected deeply with the case. This was why he started TAPS, helping people, not creating entertainment. For once, it felt like the old days. Then everything went wrong. The network edited the investigation dramatically. They added sound effects Grant never heard during the investigation. They manipulated the evidence presentation to make it look more dramatic than reality. Grant learned about these changes only when the episode aired. He watched with horror. The family from the location contacted him immediately, upset. That's not what happened. Grant tried explaining he hadn't known about the editing. They didn't believe him. His reputation was damaged. Grant immediately called the producers, furious. "You made me look like a fraud. That's not the evidence we found." The producer responded coldly, "We need good TV." Grant shot back, "I need my integrity." A shouting match ensued. "Then maybe you're in the wrong business," the producer said. In that moment, Grant realized they were right. He was in the wrong business, at least the business ghost hunters had become. After that call, Grant knew with absolute certainty he couldn't do this anymore. He wouldn't sacrifice his integrity. He wouldn't disappoint clients who trusted him. He wouldn't miss more family time for a show that didn't respect him or the work. The decision crystallized in that single moment. Grant requested a private meeting with Jason. "I'm leaving the show," he stated firmly. Jason's response, "You can't. We have contracts." Grant, "I'll figure it out." Jason, "You're destroying everything we built." Grant's final words, "You destroyed it, not me." The meeting ended badly with their friendship officially over. Lawyers got involved immediately. Grant's contract had time remaining. The network could sue. Grant was willing to risk it. Eventually, they reached an agreement. Grant would finish the current season, then officially depart. He signed an NDA about the real reasons, essentially buying his silence for the sake of Ghost Hunter's brand. Grant accepted it to move forward. The final episodes were filmed with Grant and Jason barely speaking off camera. The official announcement came in May 2010. Grant Wilson leaving Ghost Hunters to spend time with family. Fans were devastated. Some were angry, others understanding. Grant remained silent on social media. He couldn't explain the full story. He had to let people think whatever they wanted and focused entirely on rebuilding his home life. Adjusting to normal life was strange after years of constant travel. Grant was suddenly present for kids' school events, eating dinner with his family nightly, and actually home on weekends. His kids had to adjust to having dad around constantly. His marriage slowly began healing from years of neglect. The financial adjustment was significant. Ghost Hunter's income disappeared completely. Savings helped during the transition. Eventually, Grant started a new business, a water treatment company, returning to his plumbing roots. The income was drastically reduced compared to television, but it was worth it for family time. His priorities had realigned completely. Grant never stopped investigating the paranormal. He just stopped doing it on television. He took private cases quietly, helping people who needed it. No cameras, no drama, just pure investigation. This was why he started TAPS originally. He found peace in that authentic work again. Watching Ghost Hunters continue without him brought mixed feelings. The show went on with Jason as sole lead and new team members added. Ratings eventually declined. Grant wanted the show to succeed, but felt vindicated by the struggles. They needed both of us, he realized. The silence from Jason was painful. Years passed without any communication. Their friendship was completely over. Mutual friends were caught in the middle. Grant tried reaching out once. Jason didn't respond. Grant had to accept that chapter was permanently closed. Grant briefly returned for the 2019 Ghost Hunters reboot. Jason wasn't involved, so circumstances were different. Grant agreed to a limited role to test the waters, but the same network dynamics, scheduling pressures, and compromises were requested. Grant realized nothing had changed. He left again after a short time, this time permanently. He had learned his lesson. Some chapters should stay closed. Grant now does occasional guest appearances on paranormal shows, but only on his terms, never compromising integrity again. Grant wishes he'd fought harder during initial contract negotiations. I should have set boundaries from the start, he reflects. He let success sweep him along without protecting what mattered most. By the time he tried to establish boundaries, it was too late. He would negotiate very differently now, knowing what's truly non-negotiable. Hindsight provides painful clarity. His biggest regret is losing the friendship with Jason. We were like brothers, Grant says with visible emotion. He wishes they'd communicated better instead of letting resentments build silently. They should have addressed issues earlier before they became insurmountable. Maybe they could have saved the partnership, maybe not. But Grant wishes he'd tried harder. Grant regrets staying quiet too long about network manipulation, creative concerns, and schedule impact on his life. I was too accommodating. I thought things would improve. They only got worse. He learned that your voice matters and you must use it before problems become unfixable. He wishes he could have been honest with fans publicly. Family Reasons was incomplete. Fans who supported the show deserved better explanation, but the NDA prevented it. If negotiating departure terms again, Grant would demand different conditions, allowing more transparency. Grant should have prioritized family sooner instead of waiting until crisis point. He missed moments with his kids that can't be reclaimed. Kids don't stay young. Success means nothing if your family falls apart. He learned an expensive lesson and hopes others learn from his mistakes. He should have walked away the first time evidence was manipulated. Drawing a line in the sand earlier would have prevented further compromises. Integrity isn't negotiable. Your reputation takes a lifetime to build and moments to destroy. Protect it fiercely. Grant would tell his younger self, success will change things. Protect what matters most. Money isn't everything. True friends are rare. Integrity is priceless. Family comes first. Set boundaries early. Don't lose yourself in the process. What he doesn't regret. Leaving when he did, choosing family, standing up for integrity, walking away from money, starting TAPS, creating Ghost Hunters, helping people through investigations, and making paranormal mainstream. His relationship with his kids is now strong, his marriage survived and thrived, and he still does paranormal work he loves on his own terms. His advice: know your non-negotiables. Success isn't worth losing family. Integrity can't be compromised. Real friends support your needs. Sometimes walking away is actually winning. Grant is ready to provide his complete truth after 13 years. The primary reason was genuinely family. Family Reasons was absolutely true. but more complex than I could admit publicly. His kids were growing up without him. His marriage was strained to breaking. He was missing everything that mattered. I was becoming a stranger to my own children. His wife's patience was exhausted. He had to choose, and the choice was clear. The creative integrity reason was equally important. I couldn't be part of fake investigations anymore. Evidence manipulation was increasing. The network prioritized drama over truth. That's not why I started TAPS. We were about helping people, not entertaining viewers. Grant felt like a fraud. He couldn't look clients in the eye anymore. His integrity mattered more than money or fame. The Jason factor destroyed him emotionally. Our partnership was over. Not just as a business disagreement, but fundamentally. We had different values. Jason chose money and fame. I chose authenticity. He wasn't the friend I thought he was. Both men had changed. They couldn't work together anymore, and that loss was profound. Network pressure made the situation impossible. Sci-Fi wanted a different show than we created. More scripted, more dramatic, less authentic investigation. Grant opposed every change and lost every battle. I had no voice anymore. I was just talent, not a partner. That position was completely unacceptable to him. The schedule was literally impossible to sustain. I was gone over 250 days per year between filming, conventions, and appearances. I had no time for actual life. I was exhausted constantly. I was missing my own life while it happened. Grant addresses the financial reality directly. Yes, I walked away from millions of dollars. Ghost Hunters was extremely lucrative, but happiness matters more than money. Kids don't care about your bank account. They want a present parent. My best investment was time with family. The complete picture wasn't one single reason, but a combination of everything converging simultaneously. Family was the catalyst. Integrity was the requirement. Jason was the loss. The network was the frustration. The schedule was impossible. All of it hit at once like a perfect storm. I couldn't stay under any of those conditions, let alone all of them together. Grant runs a water treatment business and is home every night. His kids are teenagers now with a strong relationship with their father. His marriage is stronger than ever. Every sacrifice was worth it. He still investigates paranormal cases privately on his terms. No contact with Jason exists, but Grant has made peace with it. He's proud of Ghost Hunter's legacy despite how it ended. His advice: protect your integrity. Family comes first. Success isn't everything. Would he return? That chapter is closed. His message to fans: I hope you understand now why I left. It was necessary to be the father, husband, and man I needed to be.